Writing a book is a collaborative process, whether you like that or not. So you might write in solitude and that's fine. But when it comes to publishing the book, you better have some really great people on your side helping you through the process. And then I realized that the work was just beginning. Like I really thought that the writing of the book, the publishing of the book was like the ultimate. But I very quickly realized, as you realized, as everybody listening to this has realized, the work is just beginning when you get that book in your hands. And I made so many mistakes with that book. Now, I made a lot of really good decisions with that book too. So it was ultimately very successful and it launched a really great writing career for me. But when I look back and think about all the ways that I wasted time and energy and money getting my book out, I felt and still feel very passionately that when you learn hard lessons, the only way to really heal from those hardships is to teach others to not make the same mistakes that you have made.
Welcome to the Stark Reflections on Writing and Publishing podcast. There has never been a better time for writers. More information, options, and opportunities are available to you, but navigating these requires insight. Join Mark Leslie Lefebvre as he draws upon more than a quarter century of experience as a writer, a bookseller, and a trusted book industry consultant to explore and reflect on the writing and publishing landscape to help you make informed choices on your writer journey.
Hello, Reflectives, and welcome to episode 360 of the Stark Reflections podcast. This is your host, Mark Leslie Lefebvre. In today's episode, I have an interview with Roseanne Cheng. Roseanne Cheng is an award-winning author, ghostwriter, and book marketer who is passionate about educating authors and publishers about the power and opportunity of having their works elevated to the international market. We talk about her writing life, her author mentoring life, and about how DropCap Marketplace is a great bridge between indie authors and the licensing of foreign language rights through traditional agencies and book scouts. And that interview is coming up later in this podcast. But first, let's hear a word from this episode's sponsor.
Ready to elevate your writing career? Join the Cruising Writers Group sailing the Caribbean from Galveston on February 22nd to March 1st, 2025. This time, we're focused on indie authors, with special guests Mark Leslie and Aaron Wright leading a deep dive into the world of self-publishing. You'll come away with invaluable insights, but also great memories as you connect with other writers and explore charming ports of call in Roatan, Honduras, Costa Maya, Mexico, and Cozumel. Visit cruisingwriters.com to book your spot today.
And in comments from recent episodes, I saw over on the Twitter sphere, Edward Downward said, for this week's Stark Reflections, I must report that Houdini by Dua Lipa is the song presently playing in my head. Actually, when I report writing happens, I'm operating in a similar manner. Well, thanks for that. I actually didn't know the artist who sang that song Houdini, so then I went and looked it up and I'm like, oh, this one, oh, cool. And then, of course, then I watched the video, and now, of course, the song stuck in my head. So thanks for that, Edwin. You can leave comments for episodes over at starkreflections.ca, at me on the social medias, or email them directly to me. And now for a personal update. All right, I went into way too much detail for a personal update last week, but a few things that are going on this week are I've made some progress on one of the projects I'm working on for Sudbury Public Library for young writers. So made some progress, got some contracts signed with some of the writers, have actually paid some of those young writers, one of the larger winners and then one of the runner-ups, which is very exciting. So progress is moving forward. Also secured some stories from other writers for that one, so that's really great. And I've made quite a bit of progress with some artwork from both my cover designer as well as some interior artwork that's going to be part of the special 20th anniversary edition of One Hand Screaming. And I've even made some progress on building the Kickstarter. And do let me know, listeners, if you want me to do any extra insights about that Kickstarter and how I've created it or how I set it up or some of the steps, because I'm more than happy to talk through some of that. And of course, as the podcast continues, I'll talk you through the hows and the whys, and obviously I'll share all the wonderful mistakes I make along the way. But other than that, I have been working on the content for One Hand Screaming, because it's not just republishing a book. I'm making it twice the size. I'm taking a selection of stories I've published over the last 20 years, as well as new stories that have never been published anywhere, and putting them together. And I have to write fresh introductory notes for each story, just brief little Rod Serling kind of intros. And then, of course, in-depth behind-the-scenes writing about behind the story, which may have spoilers and stuff. So that's at the very end of the book, and meant for if you've read the story and you want more details, you can get into it. But the introduction is just high level. Hey, set the scene, set you up. Here's the story, and then the behind the scenes. So I'm really pumped about this. Oh, also, I did have a conversation with a local brewer, and we're meeting together. I outlined the plan of what I want to do with the tie-in beer for that special edition, and we're meeting next week and in person, so we can go through some of those steps and what it's going to cost for me to manufacture this beer. So again, I'll keep y'all in the loop as this continues. But that's it for the introductory blather for this episode. Let's get into my interview with Roseanne Cheng. Roseanne, welcome to the Stark Reflections podcast.
I'm so happy to be here, Mark. Thank you for having me.
Well, I'm so excited to have you on the podcast, because I have had the benefit of chatting with you, but I have not had the privilege of introducing you to the awesome listeners of this podcast. Now, the first thing that I was so excited to hear about you is your background in helping writers, as well as helping writers understand more about the business of writing and publishing, because that's my thing. So I'm like, hey, like we were two peas from the same pod. Can you talk a little bit about your background and that passion for helping writers?
Yes, absolutely. I'd love to. So this is going to sound like a familiar story. So my first book came out in 2013, which was 100 million years ago in terms of publishing. Okay. And I, like so many writers, indie writers, learned as I went. So I worked so hard on that book. I'm still so proud of that book. That book will always have a very special place in my heart. And I remember the feeling of getting like my first shipment, my box of books. I pulled it out, I felt it in my hands, and I thought, I did it. And then I realized that the work was just beginning. Like I really thought that the writing of the book, the publishing of the book was like the ultimate. But I very quickly realized, as you realized, as everybody listening to this has realized, the work is just beginning when you get that book in your hands. And for me, and I say this all the time, my first book is called The Take Back of Lincoln Junior High. I wrote it when I was a high school English teacher, and it has like a teaching resource guide. I wrote the kind of book that I really wanted to teach when I was teaching. Okay. And I made so many mistakes with that book. Now, I made a lot of really good decisions with that book too. So it was ultimately very successful, and it launched a really great writing career for me. But when I look back and think about all the ways that I wasted time and energy and money getting my book out, I felt and still feel very passionately that when you learn hard lessons, the only way to really like heal from those hardships is to teach others to not make the same mistakes that you have made. Right. So I really did love publishing that first book. I loved it so much that I published another one very quickly after. And I was working with an indie publishing house out of Minneapolis called Wise Inc. Creative Publishing. And the women who run that business are still just two of my closest friends to this day. And so, as anybody listening to this knows, writing a book is a collaborative process, whether you like that or not. So you might write in solitude, and that's fine. But when it comes to publishing the book, you better have some really great people on your side helping you through the process. And Amy and Dara at Wise Inc. were my people. And so they did my first two books, and I had so much fun publishing with them. I learned so much. We became so close that it became very obvious to me through all of my learning, through the learning of the first book. And then, of course, I was like, don't repeat the same mistakes with the second book. So I didn't, but I just made more new mistakes with the second book and took other chances and had success with that book as well. And so I remember at the time my kids were really small, very, very, very small. And I was ready to go back to work. And I just thought, you know what? I know what this publishing house is missing. It's missing somebody who kind of can help authors through like those first few months after your book comes out. What the heck do you do? How do you get this book in people's hands? So they brought me on, and for about 3.5 years, I was the marketing director at Wise Inc. And that through that process of working with literally hundreds of authors, I learned that my mistakes were very special to me and my goals and my experience and my genre and all of that stuff. And I had this privilege of sitting with other authors and seeing what their struggles were and the things that they were doing well that I wasn't doing well. We would create these like custom marketing plans based on the author's goals, because everybody would come to us and say like, can you give me a checklist of like all the things I need to do to make it as like a best-selling author? Yeah. And my response would always be, I would love to give you that checklist, but it doesn't exist, because we really have to start in teaching. We call it backwards planning, but we have to start with the end result, the goal. What do you want to happen here? Do you want to sell a lot of books? Is that the goal? Just like churning out books? Because, and of course, everyone's like, of course I want to sell a lot of books. Well, yes, but when you really dig deeper with that question, some people are like, no, you know what? I kind of like, I want to be on Oprah's couch, like I want to be out there speaking and talking to like huge groups of people. And so a marketing plan for a book like that or an author like that is going to look very different than an author who's like, listen, I don't care. I write under a pen name. I'm not interested in any of this stuff. I just want to see like how much passive income I can make as an author. Right. And so that was so fun for me. And, through that process, of course, the publishing world is very wonderful and supportive, and you meet wonderful people. And I met I call her my twin flame. I think we're sisters in another life. I don't know, but her name is Josie Robinson. And she and I published books around the same time. And she had found huge success using pay-per-click ads. And that was not a strategy that I had been employing. I was more of a speaker. I was going like from school to school and taking over lessons. She wasn't doing any of that stuff, but her book was very different anyway. She sort of taught me this way of using ad strategy, getting a little technical. I'm not super technical. She's my technical brains, but yeah. She kind of taught me the tech side of the business of being a writer. And she made it so I could understand it. And let me tell you this right now, Mark. If technology is so simple that I can understand it, it is simple, because that is not my zone of genius. And so I learned how to kind of run pay-per-click ad strategies and realized I was finding successes in different ways. And Josie and I decided to kind of spin off. We still are, very close with Wise Inc., but we spun off and we created a online school, we call it, for authors called Evergreen Authors. And we built that in 2019. We were building like courses where we could really combine our two, levels of expertise around book marketing, and just use sort of we kind of have fun personalities. We like getting out in front of people. We love talking to authors, seeing how many people we could connect with. It was very like, just go with the flow. We weren't, you know what I mean? It was like, this is what we've got. If this is good for you, that's great. If not, let's find you some other marketing support. And then the pandemic hit. And we didn't really factor that into our plans, but, and this is going to sound crazy, but we launched this online course around how to be a writer right before everybody was suddenly at home taking online courses. And so really the pandemic elevated our business to another level unknowingly. We had to pivot quickly, and that's the name of the game in this business. So we were working with publishers and creating, selling courses that way. I became a full-time ghostwriter during that time. And I've written almost 20 books for, speakers who are looking for a book to accompany their business.
Right.
And then, then I moved into the rights world now, which is where I live now. So, I mean, these career paths are long and convoluted, aren't they?
Yeah, yeah, and I want to get into the rights, but before we do that, so you started off with something, you gave me a little teaser, and then you ran off in the other direction.
I know.
I know, but
Okay,
that's
bring me
good. That's a
back.
good thing. Leave them wanting more. You talked about the first book, The Takeover of Lincoln Junior High, is that right?
The take back of Lincoln
Take back,
Junior High.
sorry, the take
Yeah.
back of Lincoln Junior High, and talked about being an educator, high school teacher.
Hmm.
Right. So I'm curious, like this sounds intriguing. It's an intriguing title. Tell us a little bit about this book and was the second one, was it a follow-up in the same universe or how did that go?
You're going to talk about my special baby. Oh, I love
Yes.
that so much. Okay, so the take back of Lincoln Junior High was inspired by me sitting in the teacher staff lounge at Chaska High School in Minnesota.
Okay.
And I was probably 7 or 8 months pregnant at the time. If you've ever been to a huge, gigantic high school and you've seen a pregnant teacher walking through the halls, she's moving a little slowly and,
Yeah.
but the kids are wonderful and very supportive. And so I remember sitting in the teacher's lounge and it was just white walls all around me. And as I was sitting there I was thinking, gosh, it's so empty in here. And then I started kind of waddling back to my classroom and I look at all the walls throughout the high school and those were empty too. And I thought to myself, what if a sponsor came in and took over a school? And in exchange to, advertise their services,
Right.
they would obviously, fund the school. And obviously this was a public school at the time, a US public school. And so I kept thinking to myself, this is such a cool concept that I would love to talk to my kids about, because
Yeah.
in high school especially, they're smart enough to understand that money buys a lot of really great things. Doesn't buy everything. And everything has an extra price to it. And so I was like, gosh, what if there was like a
Mm.
group of kids that got into this? And, I think it was Toni Morrison who always said about like writing the book that you wish that you could read, and in
Yeah.
this case, teach. And so I ended up just really thinking like, gosh, that would be such a cool story. And then I stayed home with my baby daughter, who came very quickly after that. And I started writing the book, when I probably should have been sleeping when she was sleeping, you know what I mean? Just kind of keeping my
Those
brain
rare moments.
occupied.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And then I quickly became pregnant with my son. So I found myself suddenly at home with an infant and then going to have another baby on the way. And I thought to myself, well, if I'm really busy with one baby, I'm going to be super busy with two. So I gave myself basically a 9-month deadline. And I said, you're going to finish this book by the time this little
Wow.
boy comes into the world. And so I did. I wrote a second book called, I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. I finished The Take Back of Lincoln Junior High.
Yeah.
And I had my son, and I started thinking, I mean, if you have kids, like the first few months are just like a blur of what is
Oh yeah.
happening.
It was
You know what's
zombie
going
walk.
on.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
The parental zombie walk, I think.
it's real.
Yeah.
And so I kind of got out of that zombie walk. And I thought, you know what, I should reread that manuscript. Like it had been several months. And I read The Take Back of Lincoln Junior High. And I swear, Mark, I said, this is really good. I can't believe it. Like when you're in it, sometimes it's hard to be like,
Yeah.
oh, I think that was a good line or whatever. But when I had taken a break and then read it all through again, it was like, I think this story can be published.
Ooh.
So that's what I did. And I think with, having kids, like my mindset had also changed, like thinking about legacy and thinking about, I wanted my kids to see that I had chased dreams, whatever that looked like. And that's,
Yeah.
kind of a personal thing for me. But so yeah, that's when I started, going down the giant rabbit hole of publishing and all the different options that were in front of me. And I ended up publishing with Wise Inc. in Minneapolis.
Oh wow, and it sounds like they were a great publisher. Obviously, so great that you ended up wanting to help
Yes.
other writers, and so no, this is funny because it's like this sounds exciting. Because I was curious as to how, if it was set in a high school, how it related to the inspiration you might have gotten on a day-to-day basis. Now, the other thing that's intriguing, and I'm hoping you'll share links to your books. They're still available, right?
Oh yeah. Mhm.
Okay, we'll have links in the show notes at starkreflections.ca. But your role as an educator is
Mhm.
something that you still apply now, right? Because you're
Oh,
educating and supporting and propping up writers.
all the time. All the time. I mean, I am so grateful for my time as a teacher because it has made me so much better as
Right.
a publisher and ghostwriter and just somebody who works with people in general. But what ended up happening was once I started working in publishing, I sort of fell out of the fiction world. I realized that my true strength in writing was actually with nonfiction.
Yeah.
So, and it was because of my teaching background, because in high school, you can't just throw Shakespeare at kids and be like, see, get it? You have to break it down in ways that they will understand.
Right. Yeah.
And that's exactly what I was doing with my book marketing work. Just, it wasn't Hamlet anymore. It was, here's how you get your book out into the world. And so I had co-written a book marketing book with one of the founders of Wise Inc. It's called Buzz, the Ultimate Guide to Book Marketing. We wrote that together and had so much fun. And it was basically just a list of, I think it was 50 of our most asked marketing questions at the time.
Okay.
And we launched that book together and it was great. And then at Evergreen Authors, we had all of these courses, but then of course, I had to write a book for Evergreen Authors called The Evergreen Author,
Of course.
Master the Art of Book Marketing. And so, and that's been something that we use to bring people to our courses, or at least, just
Yeah.
have a resource if they're looking for a marketing resource that way. And then I did write another book about kind of the creative process. And I know, Mark, you're not an outliner, but I am very much an outliner. It's the teacher in me, I think. And so I have a book called Portable
You have a
Magic.
plan, you have a
Yes.
reverse
Oh,
plan
I've
of how
got the
you're going to
whole,
reverse engineer the teaching. Yeah, I get it.
this is who I am at a cellular level, And so, anyway, so I wrote a book called Portable Magic, which talks about kind of the writing process and publishing options that are out there for writers. So I am consistently using my background as a teacher. I'm so grateful for that time.
Yeah.
And it's made me better at what I'm doing.
What's really weird and strange, and I'm finally making the connection, is I recognize those titles for writers because I've seen them. It was
Yay!
like, that's you.
That's
Cool.
me. Yes,
Awesome.
that's me.
Awesome. All right. So in helping writers, and I'm a big advocate for publishing wide and taking advantage of all the opportunities. I work with traditional publishers, I self-publish, I do as many of the things as I can. There are areas where writers, even if they're independent, may not be the best at controlling things that maybe are still tied very intricately to global traditional publishing.
Oh,
Would that
sure.
be a correct assumption?
Oh, yes. 100%. Yes. It's always distribution, right? When it comes to like actually getting your book in the right places, that's where I think a lot of indie authors, it's not that they can't figure it out, they can, but it's very much deer in the headlights for a while. It's like, oh gosh, what does this mean, right? What's going to happen if I have my book here versus here? And the big piece of advice that we tell people all the time is you don't have to spend a lot of time trying to figure out the one place you need to be. What you do need to do is like kind of reverse engineer it, get into, and you don't even have to like imagine it. Just ask your readers, where do you buy books? Where do you consume information? Where do you spend your time online? What sorts of events would you like to see? And then use that to build kind of an organic marketing plan and a distribution plan.
I love that. I love that. But then speaking of distribution, when writers are starting to look for more, they're starting to look for ways that they hear, well, I'm doing well in English. Well, I hear there's a market in Germany for this kind of book. I hear that books sell in French. I
Mhm.
hear, et cetera, et cetera. And how does that tie into some of the work you're doing today?
Yeah, so this is so interesting because I've been part of the Wide for the Win community for a long time, just as an author trying to learn from other authors. And I really the message of being in as many places as possible, opening as many doors for your book as possible is something that has very much resonated for me, even during the years where it was like, don't worry about doing anything, just put your book on Amazon, that's all that matters, right? To me, that never felt right. And so when I've worked with authors, I've felt like, gosh, the ones that are really killing it are the ones who are staying flexible and open-minded to all the possibilities out there. So I've spent all these years coming up with marketing plans for authors that are very US centric around that. And we're able to have your book in so many different places, and you can sell it in so many different ways. So there's always work to be done there. And then when I was brought into the rights side of the business, that means selling your book's rights to an editor or a publisher overseas to translate and then publish in their own geographies. That's when I realized that there was a whole different distribution world that I had not tapped into yet. And there's a good and a bad part about that. The good part, obviously, is that indie authors are continuing to just crush it in the rights space. Some of the biggest success stories that we've had in the last couple of years at DropCap Rights Agency, which is where I am now, have been fully self-published titles, because the international rights buyers, they don't care if your book is self-published or published by one of the big five. They're looking for quality content for their geographies, right? So that all of that is wonderful. And yet at the same time, taking advantage of those sorts of channels can be quite a change for authors who are really used to being tied to the entire process, whether that's, editing or design or any of that other stuff. So it's been, again, another great, I'll use a different Shakespeare reference. Assuming that I'm teaching Othello at DropCap, and teaching people, authors, how the rights business works, I need to break down this particular Shakespeare play and have it be understandable to whether it's an indie author or a traditional author or an author that's published hybrid. It doesn't matter. What you're really moving into when you take advantage of getting your book in front of rights agents, not just rights agents, but the book buyers that they have relationships with, that you are kind of entering a brand new path of distribution. And there's all sorts of wonderful, twists and turns on that path too.
But I mean, that's where you need the guidance. That's where it's
Right.
dangerous to go alone, right?
Oh, I mean, can I tell you a quick story?
Yes, please.
Okay, so with my first book, The Take Back of Lincoln Junior High, it's about this group of kids that realizes that, some of the corporate sponsors that have come in to take over the school don't have the kids' best interests at heart. Okay.
Imagine
Can you
that, a big
imagine? I
corporation,
know.
not, yeah.
Big shock. I know. So every time I would read portions of the book, I would think, oh gosh, this would make such a fun movie, but I don't know how to do any of that. And so I got an email in my inbox just randomly from a publisher somewhere overseas. And again, I was still in kind of mom brain fog mode, but I remember reading this email. It was like, we're interested in the rights to your book. And it kind of looked like spam. And I was like, I don't know. You know what I did with that email, Mark? I deleted it. Okay.
Oh.
Well, then I come to DropCap, and we are working with an author named Joseph Nguyen, who has a mega best-selling book called Don't Believe Everything You Think. And he got a similar email in his inbox, but he is clearly a lot smarter than I am. And he decided to Google rights agencies to figure out if it was a legit rights buyer who was approaching him. And it was. And I think we've now negotiated 28 rights deals for him. He's a bestseller in Mexico and India, and lessons were learned.
Yes.
And so, but that's the thing, right? It's if you don't know the business, if you don't know the geography, if you don't know what the market in that geography can handle, it's
Right.
almost impossible to negotiate that on your own. And that's where having an agent really is crucial.
Okay, cool. So I'll turn it around, and I'll use a personal example. So with my novel, A Canadian Werewolf in New York, I've had people say, oh, this would make a great graphic novel. Other people would say this would be a great TV series. This would be a great whatever. Other people have said this would work well in another language that likes their urban fantasy. As an author who has something where I think, oh, I've heard these things. How do I explore? What do I do? And more pointedly, how does DropCap help someone like me with that?
Yes. Okay. So I'm glad you asked this. And I'm going to preface this by saying that historically, it has been near impossible to break into that space because these sorts of rights deals, like when you see a bestseller and it's like translated into 20 languages on the cover, right?
Yeah.
Those were the types of deals that were reserved for the Stephen Kings and the people who are already like mega bestsellers,
Right.
having huge agencies behind them. At DropCap, we created our own software that kind of match makes books with rights buyers. So we get all the metadata for the book. We have rights buyers all over the world. They've told us what genres they're looking for, and then we just sort of match it to them. And we use the tech. Obviously, we're using personal pitching as well to match make books with rights buyers so they can express interest and we can move forward if they do have that interest in the title. Because the indie authors have gotten so darn good at publishing quality books, and they are virtually indistinguishable from their traditional counterparts. Over the years, and seeing all of these success stories, we have really been very passionate at DropCap about expanding these opportunities to indie authors. So we created what's called DropCap Marketplace to be a bridge between the indie, very self-sustaining indie author and this rights world. So it's a place where you can list your book and take advantage of our matchmaking software and see if there's interest. And if there's not interest, we have other marketing goodies and ideas for you. We kind of call it like a LinkedIn for authors, so you can use it as a page that you can share. We have sell sheets and all these other wonderful
Wait, sell
materials that are
sheets,
helpful.
which I always
Yes.
tell authors they need to have for appealing to libraries and potentially
Yes,
books.
yes,
Oh, whoa, mind blown. Sell sheets, yay. So it's
yep,
kind of like you fill out data and it creates a sell sheet for you?
it does. Yeah, as soon as your book is in our system, then you have kind of your own custom dashboard and you click a button that says sell
Bonus.
sheet and your sell sheet pops up.
Oh my God. Where
I
have you
know.
been all my life? This is
It's pretty
awesome.
cool. I know.
So
It's pretty
so
cool.
cool. Okay.
Yeah. So
I didn't even know about that. That's so cool that you brought that up.
yeah. So and then, just some other insights about your book. And then of course our agents are scouting all of these titles as they come in because they
Right.
are looking for the next big thing that they can take to the
Right.
global market. So, you mentioned with your book, people have told you like, oh, this would be good for this market, or I've heard that this genre is really great in this country. Um, our agents are the ones who actually know for a fact, you know what I mean? Like that's
Right.
that's
Yeah.
going to be a good one. Or
Yeah.
I have a buyer who's told me, 4 or 5 times that they're looking for this type of title. So it's a matter of kind of, using our matchmaking software in conjunction with like the historical knowledge that our agents have. So we created
Oh,
the marketplace so people could list their books there, dip their toes in the rights world, so to speak, see if there's interest, and
right.
and just see what happens. Open the door.
I love that because in the same way that, Kindle was the first kid on the block, Smashwords was the next one, and then all the other retailers got involved, and you could more easily bridge that gap. You didn't have to
Mhm.
print 10,000 copies of a book to keep in your basement, right? Digital really enabled indie authors in a significant way. It didn't really take off till 2009 through
Mhm.
2012, 13, roughly. But I also have a background in book selling, worked in
Mhm.
the industry for more than 30 years. And I'm aware of places like Frankfurt Book Fair and London Book Fair. And it used to be one in Canada that died. And then just recently, Book Expo America died. But this would also be a place, it wasn't just a place where booksellers went to find out what was coming out next season so
Mhm.
they could make purchases. It was also a place where agents and editors met and books got sold and negotiated. So it still happens in a massive way at Frankfurt Book Fair and London Book Fair. But
Mhm.
as a Canadian, it's expensive. So as
Ah.
an author, clutching my little manuscript and hoping that's not how it works, by the way. You don't just show up with your manuscript. It's your agent goes
No.
there. But you do have meetings. And I did meet people over the years at the various book fairs because it's
Mm.
all about relationships. And that's really
Mhm.
what these are about that have actually helped and enabled me in so many different ways, not just my career on the helping authors side of things, but also, I mean, hey, it's where I met the folks from Draft to Digital. I met them
Mhm.
at a book fair. Um,
Yep.
but this is where these rights get negotiated. But if you're an independent author, especially an introvert who doesn't like to go and doesn't want to spend thousands of dollars,
Thousands. Uh-huh.
this drop cap kind of the way that I can put my book up on the various retailers by loading a Word document and converting it into an ebook, DropCap is almost like the equivalent of that for that rights end of thing.
Exactly. Exactly right. Yep. And you nailed it. So book fairs in theory are the most wonderful idea for an author. Like, talk about like that pie in the sky. Like, wouldn't it be great to take my children's book to Bologna and show it to these Italian
Yes.
buyers? Oh my gosh. And then have gelato afterwards. And
Mhm.
I mean, listen, if that's
Yeah.
in your budget, by all means, like go buy that ticket and just go and network and do your thing. But I have yet to meet an author who has that kind of budget to take that kind of risk. And it's almost like, why would you
Yeah.
when you can have the support of an agenting team behind you? And so, the thing that makes DropCap really unique is that a lot of this business still operates by who you know and word of mouth and by email, and all of that is great. But at DropCap, we really feel like we have to marry some technology into that as well, just
Right.
so we can scale and because there's so many books out there, there's so many quality books out there, and we don't want to miss any of them. And so
Mhm.
when we created the marketplace, that was really the way of just sort of making it so we could be even more effective at these book fairs on the author's behalf or the publisher's behalf.
Right, right. And then the other thing that I'm really impressed by is, so as an indie author, let's say I've sold oodles of my books in
Mhm.
English, and I've heard that the German market's great. What I have to do is I first have to find a translator to translate the book into German. Then I have to
Mhm.
find an editor to edit the book in German. And then once that's done, then I got to figure out the marketing and strategy of how am I going to sell a book in a language I don't understand.
Right.
So that alone, I mean, the average cost of a translation for an independent author to do it would be anywhere between $8,000 to $15,000, roughly. It's somewhere in that realm, and that's U.S. dollars, not
Yep.
smaller Canadian dollars. So that's a big chunk of change.
Yes, it is.
That's the other thing, right? So yeah, I could do it,
Mhm.
but I mean, really, like that's a
Yeah.
huge investment. But
Yeah.
I mean, it's got to cost me about half of that, probably, maybe $4,000 just to be able to get my books into DropCap, right?
Well, no. So that's the thing, right? Is that we really felt very passionately that any sort of price point that is that high is just too risky for the average indie author, and it's not fair because we could never promise a rights deal. I mean, we'd love to, but we
Right.
can't. So actually, we created the marketplace to be $97 per year. So you can take advantage of our software for $97 per year and, kind of see what happens. I also want to add something really important here. Okay.
Okay.
So we get approached by translators often.
Okay.
And we are often approached by authors who say, hey, I've already spent, $5,000, $10,000 on a translation of my book. So that should be easier for you to pitch my book to the Spanish market or whatever the case may be. And
Yeah.
that's really not true. So
Really?
this is again, another great reason to take advantage of a $97 price point as opposed to just sinking a ton of money into a translation.
Wow.
The important thing here is that we are only taking English language books because
Okay.
when we sell the rights, we are selling the translation rights to that publisher or editor or geography so they can translate the book the way that they see fit. As wonderful as your translation might be, they will likely not necessarily trust the translation, or they might have people on staff that do those translations. So it's really important that they keep their economy going as well. There's so many different moving parts there when you think about it. So again, having that very low price point of $97 per year to take advantage of the software and saving you the
Right.
huge expense of the translation, but not to mention what happens when you have that translation done yourself. If you know how to navigate the German market and sell it and create keywords in German and all of that stuff, then more power to you. That's wonderful. But the average indie author doesn't, or traditional author doesn't have that ability. So again, just another reason to take advantage of DropCap.
Oh man, that yeah, of course. And then I guess the question I have then is, well, indie authors, many indie authors have more than one book, so it's $97 for a year for me to put a book up. But what if I have, three or four books that I
Mhm.
think I'd like to, well, why not give it a shot? So the 4 or 5 books could probably cost me about $500, I'm guessing, right? 97 times. I can't do the math in my head, but
I know. Me neither. Trust me. I don't do the math in my head either. So we have a one title option for $97. We also have a 2 to 10 title option, and we price that at $297. So we do want to encourage, we know there are lots of prolific authors out there like yourself, Mark. I know you are one of them, where if you have multiple books, maybe in multiple genres, and you want to like try it out, see what happens, then you could certainly take advantage of that. If you have more than 10 books, on our website now, we ask that you just come to us. We can give you kind of a custom pricing package
right.
as well, because it really depends. Maybe you have 11 books, or maybe you have 11,000 books. So it kind of, depends.
Oh, that's fantastic. So, so where can people find DropCap online?
Okay, so you're going to go to dropcapmarketplace.com.
Okay.
And I know that you can create all sorts of links and stuff, but I also have a little present for you and the people that are listening now. So if
Ooh.
you go to dropcapmarketplace.com, you're excited about listing your book with us. If you do decide to list, you can use the promo code STARK20 and you can get 20% off of your listing at DropCap Marketplace. Don't ask me to do that math. Don't ask me.
No, I won't do the math. I won't do the math. So that's Stark, STARK 20.
Stark 20. Yes.
Stark 20. Stark 20 gets 20% off.
Yeah, just try it. We really
wow.
tried to make it such a low price point already, but then with 20% off, it kind of feels like a real no-brainer.
Yeah,
To just
no
take
kidding.
advantage for a year, see what happens. There's all sorts of, like I said, other goodies in there. There's the sell sheet. We have marketing tips that come out. We talk about rights reports. There's always opportunities to take advantage of, other promotional opportunities that we're doing around book fairs or anything else like that. So,
Oh,
I would
wow.
love
Thank you. On behalf of my awesome listeners, thank you for that. Does that mean then if somebody wanted to do the 297, they'd be able to use the 20% off for that too?
Yes.
Oh, it keeps getting better,
Yes.
and better.
Please. Yes. We'd
Oh,
love that.
awesome. And Roseanne, please let my listeners know where they can find more about you and your books online.
Oh, goodness. That's so nice of you. So I'm kind of all over the place. My personal website is roseannecheng.com. That's RoseanneCheng. It's always misspelled all the time. And then, of course, I do still have Evergreen Authors running actively. So that's evergreenauthors.com. And you can check out some of my book marketing courses and books there. And then, of course, you can always find me at DropCap and DropCap Marketplace.
Awesome. Roseanne, thanks so much for hanging out with me today.
Oh, my absolute pleasure. You're awesome.
So one of the things I love the absolute best about this conversation is, yes, we're talking about foreign language rights, etc. But I really want to reflect on Roseanne's background as a teacher and how that helped her and helps her to continue to assist authors. And I think it was her passion. It was her passion and desire to want to help other authors. And I think it's why I used the clip that I used in the introductory section. She made some mistakes and stuff, and that makes her more passionate about wanting to help other authors. And Roseanne, I feel you. Because that is, a motivation of mine is to see what I can do to help writers. But I also like the realistic way that she outlines the marketplace. Not wanting, DropCap Marketplace did not want to charge authors too much money because they recognize that it's really expensive and it's most likely that you're not going to be listed. Or you're going to be listed, but you're most likely not going to have a sale. I mean, those sales usually come when there's a lot of interest in the book, in the volume, etc. So I did go in and I did send that coupon code to my patrons back in early March when I first interviewed Roseanne, and I thought, I didn't realize how many interviews I'd stacked up. But I thought, the interview would be coming out way sooner than it did. But anyway, so Stark 20, you can get 20% off. So if you list one title, obviously that's about roughly $20 you're going to get off. Or what I did is I registered for the 2 to 10 titles. I only put up one title so far. I put up A Canadian Werewolf in New York. And the strategy I thought is I have 7 books in this series. I'm not going to put up the whole series. I'm going to put up book 1 since that's the thing that starts it. And then I'm actually seriously considering, because of the huge success that I had in the print market, not necessarily in the ebook market, but the print market for the Canadian Mounted, and also the fact that Ryan Reynolds recently posted a picture of that and the new movie's coming out, there could be some interest beyond the English language for that Planes, Trains, and Automobiles trivia book, only because of the interest generated potentially from Ryan Reynolds. So I'm going to get the Canadian Mounted up, put in some details about how much this is sold in print, not necessarily in ebook, and see where that goes. And then I'm going to look at some of the other titles that I have to see if I can generate any sort of interest. So that's those are a couple of things that I wanted to reflect on. And I think it's really important for us as authors to recognize what are the things we can do ourselves. So, for example, I have a cover designer that I use for design. Some people use interior book designers as well, because they, especially for the print books, that they want them to look really, really good. And some people hire virtual assistants. People hire different, obviously, editors and proofreaders and things like that to help polish your manuscript up. So thinking about, yes, you're an indie author, but there's probably things that you as a successful and smart business person will do to help further your career. And one of the ones I look at is, yeah, I can pay for translations and control everything myself, or I can use a platform like DropCap Marketplace, and I can pay a bit of money and I can get them out there, and I can have the experts who know what they're doing do this. But even more importantly is if I could license the rights to a foreign publisher who's in that market, who understands what cover design is going to work and what marketing skills are going to work, who can actually place the book within the context of that culture and language, it's probably going to have a better chance. So I'm in it for the long term. Speaking of long term, I believe good friend Joanna Penn has recently had a successful deal through DropCap Marketplace, but I'm pretty sure it's on a title that's been listed at least for a year, if not 2 years. So again, Jo's always been a future thinker, always been planning for the long term, always looking ahead. She's not just looking at the road in front of her vehicle, she's looking miles down the road ahead of where everyone else is. And so, it's just recognition that this is not a quick buck thing. This is a long-term strategy, and I'm all about those long-term strategies. So that's it for my reflections. That's it for this episode. If you want to support the podcast, I would encourage you to check out patreon.com/starkreflections, where you can join the awesome patrons who support this podcast for as little as $1, $3, or $5 a month. You can check out the Buy Me a Coffee link I have in the show notes at starkreflections.ca, as several of you have bought me plenty of coffees. Thank you guys so much. So thanks to all my patrons and coffee buyers out there. Love you guys so much. But other things you can do to support the podcast would be, continue to listen to the podcast. That's a huge thing. Listening to the podcast helps me, so thank you for that. Thanks for listening. Feel free to leave a review on the podcatcher of your choice, or as I like to always say, share this episode or any other episode that you think someone else that you know would find value in it, because you're going to help me and help them. And it feels good to help other people, doesn't it? I know I feel good. And I'm feeling great. And I hope you're feeling great too. So thanks for hanging out with me this week. I will catch you next week. As always, this is Mark Leslie Lefebvre wishing you all the best, dear writer. And I will catch you next week in episode 361. Until then, here's wishing you great writing and good Stark reflections.
Thank you for listening to the Stark Reflections podcast. You can find show notes for each episode at starkreflections.ca.
The music for this podcast, Laser Groove, was composed and produced by Kevin MacLeod. Check out more of Kevin's great music at incomptech.com.